coming down to City Hall, and I look forward to hearing your comments and your testimony tonight. I'm Trudy Bartley. I am the chair of the Charter Review Commission, and I'd like each of my colleagues to introduce themselves, the commissioners as well as staff for City of Columbus.
My name is Buzz Thomas. I am I'm a resident of Columbus and the South Side.
Nana Watson.
Carrie McCarthy. Carrie McCarthy. I'm a resident of Clintonville.
And staff?
Hello, my name is John Oswald. I'm with the Legislative Research Office at Columbus City Council.
Hi, I'm Laura Baker-Morrish. I'm with City Attorney Zach Klein's office.
Hi, I'm Christina Ratliff. I'm with the Mayor's office.
And to those in the audience, as well as to those in the listening public, again, I want to thank you for taking your time, for writing emails, letting us know what your concerns and your thoughts are. That's what we're here today for, to hear what you have to say. If there are any presentations that you would like to make on behalf of some of the issues that are raised or those that have not been raised, that's what we're here for, to be transparent and to listen to the residents of the city of Columbus. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to John Oswald to talk about what our work has been thus far.
Thank you, Chair Bartley. I just have a brief presentation here. We'll get through it relatively quickly and make more time for the comments. So this is just an overview of the activity of the Charter Review Commission thus far. It's just going to include process proposals so far, actions taken on those, as well as outreach efforts. So with the process, some of this is review. We had done this at the previous public hearing. Commission was seated at the January 10th council meeting. The first meeting, the organizational meeting of the commission, was held on January 28th. And then February through July, the commission meets and has met to discuss potential charter amendments. The Commission's recommendations, if any, are due to City Council by July the 10th. This is per charter requirements. If Council chooses to accept any or all of the recommendations of the Commission, they must be placed by ordinance on City Council's July 25th meeting, should they wish them to appear on the November ballot, notwithstanding a special meeting called by Council during the recess. And then the general election would be November 8th this year. So the proposals, really quickly. First, we'll talk about the initiative petition reforms as presented. This is deterring self-dealing and increasing transparency. This one particularly would create new sections 4216 and 4217 and amend sections 43 to 46 of the Charter. They would adopt a similar reform as the state of Ohio did in 2015 in response to casino and marijuana statewide ballot issues. This would disallow monopolies and similar privileges in city code or charter. If an issue presented as part of an initiative petition is determined by the city attorney to violate this ban, council would then have to place two issues on the ballot. One to approve or disapprove allowing said violation of the code or charter, and one actually voting on the ordinance or charter amendment itself. The second piece would be to increase transparency on the front end. If an initiative petition is determined to violate the new provisions, any petition turned in must include the names and addresses of all who would gain commercial benefit from that initiative and how much public money they would receive in the 3 years following passage. The third piece of the original proposal was to increase public buy-in for initiated ordinances and charter amendments, as well as referenda or recall, by requiring a certain number of signatures be sought from at least 5 of 9 council districts in Columbus. The second proposals related to open meetings or increasing flexibility for public bodies to, for example, have virtual meetings. That power is not currently found in the charter, but we follow the general laws of the state, which, as of July 1st, will no longer allow virtual participation in meetings. We received two separate proposals from the city attorney's office. The first replaces references to holding meetings of public bodies, quote, as provided by the general laws of the state, with as provided by ordinance of council. The second proposal requires public bodies to hold meetings in accordance with state law, except in the case of permitting council to allow for virtual meetings of public bodies. Council will be permitted to pass ordinances to define the circumstances by which virtual meetings may be held. And it would be incumbent upon council, should an amendment like this be placed on the ballot, incumbent upon council to ordain guidelines following potential enactment of either charter proposal. Civil service. This one was new since May. This would amend several sections of the charter dealing with civil service and personnel provisions. The central reform is a change to banding for test scores. This would alter language from stating, quote, no fewer than 3 bands to no more than 3 bands, allowing rules for test banding to be done via ordinance or policy. It would strike the language around residency requirement that we have in our charter currently, which has been deemed unconstitutional. It replaces it with residency shall be in accordance with general laws of the state of Ohio. Most of the rest is updating language that was either obsolete or not in line with the Ohio Revised Code. Some updates to the unclassified positions in the office of the mayor, for example, and clarifying temporary versus provisional employees where the distinction was not clear. A couple others were the acting mayor provisions. This is modernizing language, creating new section 62-1 and amending existing sections 60-64 and 64-1 of the city charter. Currently, only the directors of public service and public safety, or the council president, can be named acting mayor, because those were previously the only positions named in the original charter. The language would introduce the concept of the mayor's cabinet into the charter to allow additional flexibility for the mayor to determine who can be left as acting mayor in case of absence from the city or temporary inability to perform the duties of the office. The addition would exclude council president due to some concerns of conflict of interest. Advantages include increased flexibility in who can serve, as well as increasing the number of options should other individuals all be absent when needed. And then modernizing language in the city auditor sections. This is an amendment to several sections dealing with auditor functions. Much of the language in those sections is unchanged from original charter. Proposed changes allow for modern and future technology in the functions of the auditor. For example, allowing the form of a warrant or document that entitles the holder to receive money to be determined by the auditor as prescribed by state law or council ordinance. And one change, for example, also aligns the function of the auditor with state law. Right now, our charter currently requires the auditor's office to keep a record of oaths of office for elected officials. This change would place that function with the city clerk, who is already the keeper of public records for the city. So, looking at the actions taken on these proposals by the commission so far. With the initiative petition reforms, the commission moved to consider these for inclusion in the final recommendations in April, and then later moved to exclude consideration of the signature requirements from the final recommendations earlier this month. With open meetings, the commission considered 2 versions of the language. They made a motion to adopt the second version, outlining the possibility of virtual meetings in the charter itself, also earlier this month. Acting mayor provisions, the commission moved to consider these for inclusion in the final recommendations. The auditor modernization piece, commission also moved to consider these for inclusion. On civil service, commission was presented with original and amended versions of the recommendations for civil service updates, but we have not as of yet made a motion to include. Just a couple notes on outreach and public comment. Commission meetings are broadcast live on CTV and live streamed on the city's YouTube and Facebook pages. The commission website contains information regarding the schedule and pertinent materials from each meeting. And residents can submit public comment regarding the commissions at the comment page on the website, columbus.gov/charter review 2022. 2 public comment hearings being held before the commission May 10th and tonight, followed by a council hearing. It says tentative for July 12th, but I believe we are confirming that, to comment on what, if any, recommendations should be placed on the ballot for a vote by Columbus residents. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Before we get started with our speakers, do I have any comments from any of the commission members prior us to hearing our speakers tonight? Okay, hearing none. Do I have a list of speakers? Our first speaker tonight is Jonathan Beard. Mr. Beard, if you can come forward, give us your name, your address, any affiliation with any organization that you might be. We're not following the rules of council of 3 minutes, but as I have said before, if it gets too long, I will ask you to start winding down. So thank you for coming tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chair Bartley and members of the commission. My name is John Beard, 1815 Franklin Park South, here in Columbus. You don't have to worry about me being long because I hate speaking, and my notes are disorganized because I was running today. Let's see. So I want to start really in August 2015 when a group that I was a part of put the only citizen-initiated charter amendment in Columbus's 100-year charter history on the ballot. So we put a proposal to reform Columbus City Council on the ballot, only time citizens have ever done that in Columbus history. And we got our butts kicked. They spent $1 million. We had about 13,000 during the campaign. But as a result of that, during their campaign, one of the promises they made to voters was, instead of this group of citizens doing things behind doors, we'll have a charter review committee, and the charter review committee will do things in public, and they'll have best practices, and they'll be informed by experts and come up with kind of best practice reforms of the city charter. And so that's kind of the genesis of the work that you're doing right now. It was a reactive response, a political response to what we did back in 2015. I'm going to read a dispatch editorial. So this is a dispatch editorial board that wrote in August 21st, 2016, as a charter review committee after our ballot initiative was about to be seated. And I'm going to quote, "Substantive ideas are needed to discourage political mischief at City Hall and improve council's role as a watchdog over the administration and as a voice for residents and neighborhoods. But success hinges on a mutual faith." And it's talking about Charter Review Committee now. It says, "The City Council and Mayor, who will select the 7, should respect the faith voters have put in the panel to do what is in the city's best interest, not what benefits the entrenched politicians who are plied on by a criminal lobbyist and who have made a game out of council vacancies to appoint political clones, effectively disenfranchising Republicans and dissident Democrats. This panel will only be as strong as those who serve to apply. Voters have placed their trust in Ginther and the City Council to get this right and not appoint agreeable insiders who will rubber stamp the status quo." And I want to focus on that last sentence, okay? I sent each of you emails before and filed this with the city record. What's really disturbed me about this commission, this has not been the comprehensive review of the city charter that was promised, is still represented on the city webpage. Instead, you've gone after 3 or 4 items that have been handpicked, put in front of you by the city administration and the council, okay? You're not doing anything that looks at what the people want. And that's a failure of this commission that I ask you to hopefully resolve in the coming weeks. The biggest issue before the city has been the city council, okay? So because I had 20 years of experience in community development work and saw how this city is set up to disenfranchise black interests, we put a proposal for real council districts on the ballot. The business community funded a big campaign against us, and the council did likewise, and we lost. But then we tried to do it again, and the city again kind of jumped into it by forming one of these commissions, and it was chaired by Stephanie Coe, and I think Lourdes DiPadilla was a member of that commission. And they came up with this really bizarre fake council districts thing, something that's only done in 3 American cities, okay? It's done in Sparks, Nevada, Reno, Nevada, and Tucson, Arizona. At the time they were proposing this as a best practice, it was being sued in Tucson under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and the Nevada State Legislature was rewriting the constitutions of Reno and Sparks because of that. But this is the kind of nonsense that they put up there to stop black folk from having a true representative voice on council. Right now, all of our council members, we've got a majority black city council right now. We had a black mayor, and over the last 20 years, the Bank One and One Columbus just put out a report saying the rent burden for black households has increased from 42% to 51% over the last 2 decades. That's a failure. Our city government is failing us. I saw it firsthand in my role as a community development professional who raised more than $35 million for the city. Let's see. So they had, I'm going to say something else. So they put this, the last commission put this really weird form of government to the ballot, and people voted for it. City didn't run a campaign for it. Nobody really wanted it. It was supposed to be an alternative to what we were putting on the ballot, which is 2 council districts. Council kept us off the ballot, and they passed theirs, they put theirs on the ballot at the last council meeting they could have before the election. The only reason it got on the ballot was because Emmanuel Remy was just seated as a council member. At his very first council meeting, they voted on it, and he was the vote that got it passed, because they did not have the votes before, because Priscilla was saying no, and I forget who else was saying no. Let's see. They have seated an improbable 4 out of 5 members of this commission are black, okay? You are here to rubber stamp a racially biased electoral system. You didn't look at it. You haven't gone back and looked at it. You're relying on this last one, which was such a flawed model that it begs for reconsideration. I think, Carrie, you were on that committee as well. This was nothing that the city should be proud of. It's something you should look at. Nana, you know the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and I know it's not related to the NAACP, so you don't need to say that.
It's not.
I just said that right. They are the nation's foremost voting experts. They came to town. Nobody from city council would meet with them. The city attorney would not meet with them. 4 out of 7 of our city council members are black. None of them would meet with them. It's like, what the hell is going on here? When actually back to 2015, right after the Board of Elections announced we got enough signatures to get on the ballot, former State Senator Ray Miller called me. And I went into his office and he said, John, I don't know who it is, but they're going to find somebody to mirror you. They're going to find another black man to be the face of the opposition. He said, I don't know who it is. I can't think of who it's going to be, but they're going to find a black man to do that because that's what they always do. About 3 days later, Ray Ragland was appointed to be the face of the opposition, working with Brian Clark, who came out of the mayor's office to do that. Ray Ragland's a black man. This is the method they use in the city of Columbus to control the ambitions of black folk. And I pray and hope that you guys will not fall victim to it and you guys will not participate in it. We've got, I've sent you all information about what the NAACP Legal Defense Fund says. Again, these are our nation's leading electoral experts. They sent letters, they sent one-pagers, we met with about 42, 43 people through the community. The only people we didn't meet with were people from my party, the Franklin County Democratic Party, and my elected representatives, and my mayor and my city attorney. You guys got to do better than that. This is an embarrassment. The other citizen commission that's been seated this year, the Citizens Compensation Commission, again, makes a mockery. You guys are supposed to be representative of the people and maintain our trusted government, right? The Citizens Compensation Committee just came out with a recommendation. The one I remember was a 40% increase for the council president on top of his cost of living adjustment. These citizens commissions have just been, it's an embarrassment. You guys can do better. Trudy, I've known you for a long time. You can do better than this. Nana, I've known you for a long time. I don't know what the NAACP stands for if it doesn't stand for the voting rights of black folk. I'm going to wind up right now. So looking forward, there are a few things that I would ask this commission to do. One is take a serious and sober look at council districts. That's what every other big city in America has. That's what's guaranteed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Section 2 says geographically concentrated minorities have a constitutional right to elect candidates of their own choosing without their votes being diluted by the larger pool of voters, okay? That's what Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act says. John Lewis would be ashamed of what we've got here in Columbus, and we should too. So please take a close look at council districts. The second thing, one of the worst abuses of the public trust has been this history of midterm appointments, okay? So a council member will resign, often shortly before election, within a year of election, and they will appoint somebody to fill that spot, and that person then runs as an incumbent with the party support, runs on the slate with the other council members, and that effectively deprives the voters of a vote for a fresh candidate. They appoint clones. I think the dispatch article I read said that I've got articles from wherever. One of them says they appoint like-minded clones. We need to do better that. And let's see, as it goes to petitions, I've circulated a number of petitions. First time we circulated petitions to reform city council, they came up with 4 or 5 counter things that made things a little more difficult. One of the things they put in was the city attorney reviews petitions as to form. So before you circulate a petition, you file it with the city clerk, and the city attorney reviews it as to form, which means that it can be lawfully circulated. One of the things they've say is form is that citizen-initiated petitions can only address a single subject, which the Ohio Supreme Court has said is different case law than the similar state constitution provision, because we went to court on it. We lost in a 4-3 decision. And the city attorney can define what people put on a ballot, what citizens can put on a ballot. He can define what a single subject composed of. Case law under the state constitution says a single subject is not designed to discourage comprehensive legislation on a single general area. It's not to make petitioners circulate multiple petitions to cover the same general area. So there's a whole line of things. It's designed to discourage disparate items, not things that are related, reasonably related. City Attorney Pfeiffer kicked us off for having 2 proposals related to council, 2 aspects of council service on the same ballot. And like I said, we lost in a 4-3 decision in the Supreme Court. If that provision, single subject provision, stands, which I don't think it should, because the council's not similarly bound by a single subject provision, they can put whatever they want on in one vote. If that provision stands, then what you've got to do is you've got to put a 10-day limit on the city attorney's review. There are all sorts of 10-day limits throughout the ballot language, throughout initiative language. That's one area where he doesn't. We filed something recently. It took Zach 6 weeks to get us back a return. Okay, that's 6 weeks of us waiting to see if this can be lawfully circulated. And that counts into the year that we've got to circulate petitions. So please help us. You guys need to be about democracy. You guys need to be about the people. This is not about entrenching our politicians stronger into power, okay? The charter is the citizens' relationship to our government. And you are supposed to be a citizen's voice. Please stand up for the citizens of Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beard.
Chair Bartley,
Yes.
I have a question. I'd like the record to reflect that I represent the Columbus branch of the NAACP. The Defense Fund is national. We are not associated with that. Let the record reflect that. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, Mr. Beard, that you don't know what the NAACP does and stands for. So certainly we appreciate your comments. Thank you so much.
Do any other commission members have any comments? Okay, again, thank you for coming down tonight. Our next speaker is via WebEx, and it's Matt Steinschneider.
I don't think you can make it.
Okay, well, if we get through the other two speakers and Mr. Matt Steinschneider does make it through WebEx, we will hear his testimony as well. Our next speaker is Mr. Bill Lyons. Mr. Lyons, just state your name, your address, any group that you're affiliated with.
Yes, I'm Bill Lyons, 245 Walhalla Road, Columbus, Ohio. And I'm speaking as a citizen of Columbus, as well as a member of Columbus Community Bill of Rights that's been involved in citizen initiatives and other groups also trying to promote democracy in Columbus. So good evening, Charter Review Commissioners. First of all, I want to start with to thank you for listening to reason and the voice of the people and excluding the language regarding signature thresholds within districts because of the unnecessary burden it would place on the initiative, referendum, and recall process. Saying that, up to this point, the Commission has only adopted recommendations from city officials. The public recommendations for our city charter must be given at least the same serious consideration for the charter review process to be legitimate. I have 3 recommendations that I've submitted in my testimony, and then I'll quickly just like to add a couple things there at the end there, so that I didn't write up per se, but I might write them up and send them to you as well. The 3 recommendations involve Section 42, which is entitled Petitions for Initiated Ordinance, Referendum, Recall, Charter Amendment. So my first recommendation is to amend Section 42-7 as suggested, and I've written to you below with the language to remove the 1-year time limit regarding filing petitions for initiated ordinance or charter amendments. So in the actual language from the city charter, I have edited it to show you what I recommend is drawing a line through where it says within 1 year of filing a certified copy of the same, but the rest of it can remain the same. So let me give you my justifications for that. Prior to 2014, Columbus had no time limit on petitioning. There was no problem cited at that time or legitimate reason for this 1-year limitation being placed on initiative. Also, no other city in Ohio has this 1-year time limit, nor the state on signature gathering for initiative. In 2014, Columbus Charter Review Commission recommended several amendments to the city charter. One of these changes was to limit the length of time for citizen initiative campaigns to 1 year, thereby stifling direct democracy. There was no initiative that they cited that presented a problem to warrant such a restriction in all the years of Columbus having our right to initiative and referendum. This provision, of course, was wrapped up in recommendations, other recommendations that were, I think it was issue 6 at that time, or 7, I can't remember, that were put on the ballot in November 2014. Some recommendations were beneficial, and they acted kind of as a Trojan horse for voters to vote for the whole package. So the important rights of initiative and referendum, as I've stated before, have been part of our state constitution since 1912 and part of our city charter since 1914. In 1915, the Ohio Supreme Court described voters' initiative and referendum powers as essential safeguards to representative government. So that's the end of quote. These safeguards are vital as checks and balances when elected officials are not acting in the public's interest. Moreover, all good ideas for our city charter do not only come from city officials. So in Columbus, very few citizen-led initiatives have ever made it to the ballot. In fact, I'm aware, and Mr. Beard had just mentioned, of only one initiated charter amendment to ever make it on the ballot in Columbus, and only a handful of initiated ordinances. So this illustrates why it's already exceedingly difficult for citizens to exercise their constitutional right of initiative in Columbus. This is not only anti-democratic, but a restriction on free speech, whereby potentially creative and important reforms never make it to the electorate for consideration. So in fact, the group that I've have collected signatures for, the Columbus Community Bill of Rights, a group for which I've voluntarily collected thousands of signatures to protect our water from frack waste, was well on its way to becoming the second initiated charter amendment to ever make it on the Columbus ballot. The group's fourth initiative was 9 months into the campaign, having collected already 9,000 signatures, very hard work, when COVID disrupted our lives in March 2020. Because of the shutdown orders from the governor and the health risks to the petitioners and the public, the group made the responsible decision to suspend their campaign. They appealed to City Council to invoke the emergency measures section of the city charter so that the group could restart their campaign when it was deemed safe to collect signatures again. Seems like a reasonable request. I think most people would agree. But City Council refused their request. So you can't imagine the outrage of this injustice, especially for the people who have petitioned to collect these signatures, and the voters who have signed to say they want to vote on this. So petitioners had already spent thousands of hours having collected those 9,000 signatures to be told they would have to start all over again sometime. Meanwhile, the hypocrisy set in when City Council, the Franklin County Commissioners, and other government groups were scrambling to hold their meetings virtually as they deemed in-person meetings to be too dangerous. So the only possible justification for a time limit on petitioning is that it would not be desirable for petitions to be filed many years or decades after a petition campaign began, and I agree. However, there's never been an example of this happening prior to 2014. Like I said, no example was ever cited. So this one-year time limit was another example of a solution in search of a problem. And like I said, other cities don't see that there's a problem that they've implemented this. Neither does the state. So petition committees do want to get their initiatives on the ballot as soon as possible. It's just that it may take a couple of years, especially in times now that we live in a pandemic or, God forbid, another pandemic or some other emergency measure happens. And some other unforeseen circumstances. Also, the longer it takes to file petitions, the more signatures you will be required, because some voters will have moved, some of them, their registrations will have expired. So if you're going to go longer, you need to collect more, so it's more work. But is there really any harm on the public if an initiative campaign, say, takes 2 or 3 years? Is that really create a harm? The initiative process is hard work, and you can see by the lack of them making it to the ballot in Columbus. But most campaigns beyond 2 or 3 years would probably fizzle out anyhow. So this would be like I would imagine, the limit that any initiative would ever probably go, in my opinion. So the second recommendation is to amend section 42-9, as I've suggested in the language here. I've given you the language that I recommend, to grant additional time to remedy a signature deficit. So this recommendation mirrors what's in our Ohio State Constitution. In Article 2, Section 1G, in the section entitled Petition Requirements and Preparation, it states, and I quote, "If petitions or signatures are determined to be insufficient, 10 additional days shall be allowed for the filing of additional signatures to such petitions." So adopting this recommendation only makes sense, as it would be unfair, expensive, and unjust if an initiative fell short by a small number of signatures and could quickly make up the signature deficit rather than having to start all over again. Also, there's no harm to the city and its citizens if 10 additional days are allowed to remedy a signature deficit. Okay, and my third recommendation is to amend Section 42-5 as suggested below, and I've written language that I've edited from our city charter, to limit the time for the city attorney to determine if a petition meets the single subject and form requirements, as Mr. Beard had also mentioned. So there must be a limitation on the time for the city attorney to determine if a petition addresses a single subject and meets the form requirements. Otherwise, the city attorney can sit on this, and groups, and after groups have submitted their signatures and their petitions, the city attorney could declare the petition invalid. If there's no time limit, he could do that. The city attorney's office is huge, and 10 days is a reasonable limit to determine the petition sufficiency. All other parts of the process involving government employees have time limitations in the city charter. 10 days is a common limitation, and I quote in Section 42-9, it states, "Within 10 days after filing, the city clerk shall cause copies of the petitions to be made and shall forward the petitions to the elected authorities, ... Also, in Section 42-9, it states, "Validation of signatures shall be reported by the election authorities within 10 days of their receipt of the petition." So, I just want to add a couple things, like I said very quickly, that I agree with Mr. Beard that the city council district should be, there should be a balance of some elected at large and some representative of the 9 city council districts. So we do have true representation. And also, one final recommendation before I have a short conclusion is that in this charter review process, and you had 7, I believe it was 7 meetings with city officials before there was a public hearing, and now you've had 10 meetings and this is the second one. Why can't it be written in the city charter that for future charter review commissions that the city officials' recommendations for charter changes are submitted at the beginning of the process? The public will then know what the recommendations are, and they can be involved from day one. So you can still have the city officials present to you, but everybody will know what they are. They can still present to you, but then the public can be involved and give you that balance of, well, wait a second, I know they're recommending this, but I'm giving you an alternative point of view. Because I know some of your comments were like, okay, when the city presents their arguments, you were like, I don't have anything to base this on. Haven't heard from the public. So that process, I think, would make it much more democratic. And like I said, I haven't written the language, but I'm sure it can be drafted so that the city officials' proposals for charter changes are at the beginning of the process, and then the public can be involved along the way and provide a balance for that. To me, that makes sense. So, in conclusion, one of the primary motivations reported for revising the Columbus City Charter was, and reported in the papers, was to thwart so-called self-dealing measures like Issue 7 last November. Well, the Commission, I believe, has done that with the recommendations that they have adopted. Now the Commission has the opportunity to right the wrongs that have worked against grassroots citizen initiatives and genuine, meaningful participation in our democracy to make our city better for all. Columbus has progressively enacted people-unfriendly and unjustified restrictions on the initiative process, and now it's time for a change of action. So, if these proposals that I suggested were to be added to the Charter Review Commission, it would be the best birthday present I could ever receive because I would share it with all the Columbus residents. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks for your,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Lyons, for your testimony. Just have a couple quick questions, if I may. Do you have any viewpoints on whether or not, if we were to get rid of the 1 year limitation, would 2 years, 3 years, is there a time limit that would be acceptable in your mind, or?
Like I said, that we know like the pandemic has raged on for a couple years now. So I would say if you want to put any time limit, I would say 5 years would be some kind of balance. Like I said, no other city in the state has any limit that I've seen, and I've looked at their charters. But if you wanted to put a balance in, I would say 5 years, especially in the times we live now, because who knows? Because things are affecting us in ways we never imagined, right? And it affected us so drastically.
One quick follow-up to that. Do you, just to clarify, and you said this, but I just want to underscore it to make sure I understand it correctly. If you are collecting signatures over a period of time, and you collect a signature from a person who is registered at the time in which you, or maybe let's say lives in the city and is a registered voter in year one, in let's say 2 years from now you file the petition and that person has moved and is no longer a registered voter in the city of Columbus, what you said, and as I understood you, that signature would not count.
No, it's not valid.
Okay.
No, it is not valid.
If you did have an extended period of time to collect signatures, it would still only be reflective of registered citizens at the time of filing.
Yes, because the Board of Elections, and I know this very well because I've regularly liaised with Jeff Mackey, who's in charge of the petitions and all. Yes, they have to be, when they're submitted, that they are registered voters at that address that they have signed the petition for.
Okay.
Yes.
I have one last question, Chair, if it's okay.
Yeah.
This is a sort of a bigger picture question. And when I listen to your testimony and hear the suggestions presented by you and your colleagues, I get to thinking a lot about the difference between direct democracy and representative democracy. And what I'm trying to think through is, where is the line? Because having worked at the state level, experienced some frustration with access to the ballot there and making sure there is, a representative voice heard at the state level. But I also recognize that, with direct democracy, you can flood the ballot with issues, not you, but many issues can end up on the ballot, and important stuff can get lost in the shuffle between things maybe that are not the most well thought out things. Where do you draw that line?
Well, I would look at it as like before 2014, was Columbus flooded in the ballot with any initiatives that when people went to vote? I don't, especially with citizen initiatives, it's never really happened there. And I don't know of other cities that have been flooded with initiatives. I just don't think that, I can understand the worry, but it hasn't panned out that way because it's still hard work, damn hard work. And especially for groups like ours who don't pay petitioners to collect those signatures. And word gets out, just like it did with issue 7, that even though they paid and they got on the ballot, people knew that there was a problem here. That's why it was defeated so soundly. So,
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question as well.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it really is aligned with the other commissioners. The question is, so in the situation where you had collected 9,000 signatures, are you also thinking about traumatic, extenuating circumstances that would allow you to extend the time frame, as well as having a specific time limit? So 2 different things.
Well, here's the thing. If that time limit was, if there wasn't that 1 year time limit,
Right.
and there was none like there was before, or let's say 5 years, okay. Then I think that
It would cover.
it would cover that.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other
I
questions?
have one more. I'm sorry.
No,
quickly,
please, I'm happy to entertain
You
questions.
mentioned in your remarks that you supported the idea of reviewing award system for the city. It's not reflected in your written testimony.
No, I said that by the time I wrote it, that I didn't get that, added that, but I can still submit those comments in writing to you as well. But I wanted to make sure I said that also, so, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Joe Motel. Mr. Motel, again, state your name, address, any group you're affiliated with.
Yes, thank you. Joe Motel, 167 West Cook Road, Columbus, Ohio. Chair Bartley, members of the commission. The following are my requests for consideration of charter amendments that are needed to allow for Columbus citizens to better participate in a democracy that's been stripped away from them over the years by various city elected officials and to address corruption within city government. First, as already has been mentioned, I would like to request a 10-day extension on signature gathering for ballot initiatives, just as the state has, and to eliminate the one-year requirement to gather signatures for ballot initiatives. Under Section 15-1 of the Council, members of the Citizens Commission on Elected Officials' Compensation shall not be former public elected officials or employees of the city or related to any public elected official or employee of the city. Such members of that commission shall be elected by the city electorate. I also recommend that Chapter 2321, Section 54C, legislative agents, read that no former city or state elected official or former city employee shall be permitted to serve as a legislative agent or lobbyist. As many of you know, we have former mayors, judges, council presidents, administrators that work for the development department that serve as lobbyists, many who have a great deal of influence over our current elected officials. I also would like to include in the following to Section 107.02 to the campaign finance laws to prohibit the solicitation or acceptance of campaign contributions from persons having a financial interest in city business while such business is pending before council. No more giving money while a developer is actually in the process of going through planning and such with the city of Columbus or other things and donating money to elected officials. In-kind contributions shall be limited to $5,000 per reporting period. There is an unlimited amount of in-kind contributions that's allowed. Back when they passed the campaign finance reform laws, they kind of mirrored the state's campaign finance campaign contributions, but put no limits on in-kind contributions. City of Columbus, historically, the council president for the city of Columbus gives tens of thousands of dollars in in-kind contributions to the typically would be the former appointee who is running for office, as it has what that was discussed earlier, and this creates, I think, and I think others would agree, that they become beholden to the council president because they've given them so much money that to get them reelected. Under Section 41.3, nomination of municipal officers shall read that the number of signatures required for the offices of mayor, city attorney, and city auditor should be reduced from 1,000 to 500. Under Chapter 111.12, Section 2, for regular business meetings, individuals shall be permitted to submit a total of 4 speaker slips instead of 2. And of the 4 speaker slips, 2 of them may be used to address a non-agenda matter. Under that same chapter, Section 2A, for agenda items, council shall entertain 4 instead of 3 speakers for for 4 instead of 3 against any ordinance recognizing speakers in the order of the slips that are received by the clerk. Each speaker shall be given 4 minutes instead of 3 to speak. For non-agenda items or public comment, 6 speakers shall be permitted to speak for 4 minutes each instead of 3 minutes. Under the same chapter, section 3, for zoning meetings, city council zoning meetings, speakers shall be limited to 5 speakers instead of 3 by both proponents and opponents, and all speakers shall be given 4 minutes instead of 3 minutes to speak. There is so many people go over the limit at 3 minutes, and council typically is pretty generous in terms of allowing some extra time at times, but there's always for some of these really controversial zoning matters and ordinances and things, there's many more people would like to speak. And again, we have to open this council up to the people and create more of a democracy and allow for people to have more input in terms of some of these controversial zoning matters and non-agenda items as well. In terms of chapter 111.18, when city council adjourns city council meetings, it should be amended to read that a motion to adjourn shall not be in order until non-agenda speakers have been given the opportunity to address council, so that a speaker's comments are on the record and heard by the listening public. As you should know, City Council currently adjourns their Monday meeting prior to public comment, which then signals the audio and video city technicians to stop recording the meeting. This, of course, prevents the viewing public from hearing any other public viewpoints of concern and possible scrutinizing of public officials. Adjourning the meeting prior to public comment is got to be one of the most flagrant slaps in the face of democracy that is practiced by our mayor and city council. It is shameful that they adjourn and do not allow the public to listen to public comment from people. And they do it on purpose because they do not want to be scrutinized. Under chapter 111.35, procedure to fill vacancy on city council shall be amended to read, any appointee chosen to fill a vacancy on city council shall not be permitted to run for election for city council once that appointed city council member's term has expired. Again, this appointment process that was brought up is a farce, and everyone knows it. And the musical chairs, puppets has got to stop. So if they want to appoint somebody, that's fine, but that person cannot run in the next election that comes up for that unexpired term. In terms of under chapter 2321.56, ethics disclosure, it should be amended to include, shall be a department of anti-corruption. As a part of this department, it would replace the chief ethics officer with a nonpartisan inspector general who would investigate alleged unethical and corrupt behaviors of city employees and city elected officials. It would also establish a confidential whistleblower hotline and allow for lawful disciplinary action against city employees and elected officials who are privy to unethical and corrupt activities and do not report such activities. The last one, and I wrote this down, I'm going to try and read my writing, it's pathetic, but what was brought up about the current city council election in 2023 for the districts. Again, this is nothing more than an extension of what we have, an extension of the at-large election. Instead of 7 members at large, we're going to have 9 members at large. The electorate should only be allowed to vote for the candidate in their district, period. By allowing the entire electorate of the city of Columbus to vote in every district is nothing more than what we currently have. And if that doesn't change, nothing's going to change. This at least gives an opportunity for people that live in those districts to vote and elect their district representative. And as Mr. Beard stated earlier, it's a farce, and there's still people that don't quite understand that you could lose your district seat even though you won your district but lost the at-large vote. That makes no sense whatsoever. So I will email these to Mr. Oswald so that you can review them a little bit better. But again, thanks for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Just have one question. Thanks for your testimony, Mr. Motel. I wanted to ask about the appointment process, because this was something that we talked about in 2016 on the Charter Review Commission. Do you think that if someone is appointed to fill a vacancy and they serve for a period of time, 3 months, 4 months, whatever the term is, what do you think has more of an influence on the outcome of that person being reelected? Is it the fact that they served for 2 or 3 months on council, or is it what happens outside of this building, which is that the county party endorses and they run as a slate, and that is, what do you think has more of an impact on, I think, what is the issue that you're, at the heart of the issue that you have a concern with?
It's a combination. It's a combination of incumbency, face time at city council and such. And then, again, their name will be on the Franklin County Democratic sample ballot. That includes, and the fundraising that they'll receive and such. So it's a combination of all.
Is it an even, I mean, I guess my point, it's a little bit of a leading question, because my view is that one of those things has a much bigger influence than the other. And my view is that the 2 or 3 months or 4 months, however it may be, of incumbency really probably doesn't catapult that person to be in a household name in Columbus and you know, ultimately be the driver of the thing that makes him or her reelected. It's really what happens in the political process that I think has, in my opinion, has a much larger influence on the process. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, to a degree. And I'd also say, once again, that individual was handpicked for a reason. That individual was handpicked because they're going to be a foot soldier. They are going to toe the line. They're not going to step out of bounds because that's where they were selected in the first place. But I understand what you're saying as well. Yeah.
So, Mr. Motel, I have a question. We had a similar situation that happened on the county side. I know that the rules are different, but there was an interim that served until someone was appointed. Are you looking to do something very similar to that the person would not be would not be up for election, but just serving in the interim time frame as a placeholder more so?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do I have any questions or comments by any of our commission members or any of our city staff?
I'll just make a comment on the at-large district system. I would just say, I think reasonable people can disagree on whether or not it's an effective reform, but I would submit that it's not the status quo. It is a change. It may not be a change in which everyone wanted, but I think it was reflected in the testimony that there was a contentious vote, and it almost didn't get approved by council, which I think is a reflection of the fact that this wasn't just a status quo. And so I think, in my view, as a citizen of this city and as a member of this commission, I think that there will be meaningful change. Now, will it be everything that everybody wanted? No, I don't think it will, but I do think it solves one problem, which is that you could have multiple council members serving and living in one community. It spreads out the representation throughout the community. You can also have a high concentration of support from one area that could help lead that person in that area to victory in a citywide vote. So I appreciate the testimony. I think reasonable people can disagree on this. That's my view. And as someone who served on that commission back in 2016, I think we made an earnest effort to try to find some way to make some meaningful changes to our council system. And I understand that not everybody appreciates that or supports that, but that's where I think we were, at least I was, when we went through that process back in 2016.
Do I have any other comments by any of the commission members? Okay, hearing none, I again, number one, want to thank everyone for their testimony today. please get the information, particularly from your testimony, to John as soon as possible. We will be meeting again next week regarding our recommendations that move forward. I think that there are some very valid arguments that have been made according to some of the testimony that we have heard today. John, I'm going to ask you if you could send us your information. I mean, I took down the notes that I could, but if you could send us something that we can actually discuss from everyone. And Mr. Motel, thank you for offering to send that information. And Mr. Lyons, thank you for sending it in advance. Very appreciated. What I think we all love this city, and we all want it to be the best that it can be. It's not perfect. I think that there are a lot of things we agree on. I think that there are some things we will agree to disagree, but it is a step moving forward. I believe that the charter will always evolve, and it should evolve according to the demographics that we have in our city. This is, as you said, I think next time when this does meet, that there should be a little different process that's more engaging with the community as we move forward, addressing those subjects and having the public be a part of those conversations as we move forward and not just after the fact, because I think it's important to understand what you think as we look at what we are reviewing or being asked to review. So again, thank you for making us think better as far as the process and actions moving forward. And again, I want to thank everyone for their time. And I would like to have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. And again, thank you everyone for attending.